Notre Dame is on the road after a bye week playing North Carolina, the number 19 team in the country. Of course, Notre Dame is number two, and we will get into the college football playoff rankings here first. But if you're not subscribed to blueandgold.com, have the promo code up on the screen, Nike75. You pay $75 for the first year of your annual subscription, and you get $75 free in Nike gear. Go to blueandgold.com for more information. Lou, interestingly enough, for as long as Brian Kelly and Mack Brown have been coaching, this is their first matchup. Why don't you tell us about these two guys' careers?
Yeah, there's been a lot of intersection there, and it's kind of funny. I'm not saying this just because they're playing this week, but when Brian Kelly was hired at Notre Dame in 2009, the guy he kind of reminded me the most was Mack Brown, in that they're very, very media savvy, polished, um, good ambassadors for the program builders. And for the longest time, Mac Brown was viewed as the coach who can't win the big one,
Hmm.
especially when he was at Texas after a very successful, 10-year run at North Carolina. He goes to Texas, and that's one of those blue blood programs where you're always expecting national title contention, and they were losing constantly to Oklahoma by scores like 63-14, 66-14, and it's not a case of Mac Brown can't even win a national championship. He can't even win the Big 12.
Hmm.
And he was hearing that for the longest time. And finally, that breakthrough came with Vince Young at quarterback. Then they win the national title in 2005. And it's kind of funny, his descent at Texas coincided with Brian Kelly's ascent at Notre Dame when he was hired in 2010. And the funny thing is, in 2009, when Brian Kelly was hired, he was 12-0 at Cincinnati, and the team that kept him out of the national championship game was Texas, because Texas kicked a last second, it was like almost 50-yard field goal, I think, or even 50 yards to beat Nebraska in the Big 12 title game. So Texas with Mac Brown played Alabama in the title game that season. They coached together at the 2003 Hula Bowl. That was kind of like their first interaction, and that's when they kind of become really good friends because um, on Mac Brown's staff was both the Division One AA national champion coach Jack Harbaugh from Western Kentucky and Brian Kelly from Division Two national champion Grand Valley State. So it's sort of like Brian Kelly won a national title. It's like I want to learn from this guy,
Hmm.
um, as Mac Brown said. So interesting relationship that goes back a long while. And there's great respect that Mac Brown has shown for Notre Dame too. Unlike some other coaches, he really welcomed Notre Dame with open arms to the ACC, saying this is really good for the league, it's good for revenue, and it's something that was needed.
Now, UNC brings in pretty high-powered offense. Sam Howell, the quarterback, has looked very good this season. What concerns you the most about North Carolina? I mean, I just set you up, Lou. It's got to be their offense because I don't think their defense is very good.
Well, when you look at their scores, they beat Virginia Tech 56-45. They beat Wake Forest 59-53. They lost to Virginia 44-41. You can kind of see which way it's going. this
Right.
this is they win shootouts. They shoot the threes. It's kind of similar to Brian Kelly's last Cincinnati team in 2009 where they were winning games 45-41, etc. Um, so that's their MO. This game comes down to which defense is going to be able to make the more crucial stops. And I think Notre Dame definitely is going to have the edge there. But look, when you're averaging 43.4 points a game like North Carolina, when you're throwing for 328 yards, when you're rushing for 233, just the balance that you're able to get, uh, this is it's a little bit like playing Navy in that when you play Navy, what you want to just do is be able to get out in front and um, limit the possessions for them where they don't control the ball so long. Uh, Notre Dame, I think, is going to play that ball control type of atmosphere. They're one of the top teams in the country in time of possession. 3 games now, they've had over 36 minutes of possession. and they're very good at preventing the quick strikes by opponents and getting off the field on thirds down. That's been their two MOs. North Carolina is going to score. It's can you keep it under 40, and more so, can you keep it under 30? If you keep it under 30, then I think the chances are going to be excellent for Notre Dame here, because I have a tough time seeing North Carolina keeping Notre Dame under 35
Now
or even 40.
Notre Dame's been on a roll these past 2 weeks. I mean, the Boston College win by 2 touchdowns was never really in doubt, and of course you had the win over Clemson November 7th. But this season, Lou, it just feels like, well, they're gonna look good this week, and then they don't, and then vice versa some other weeks. Which are you expecting this week? You expecting Notre Dame? Because it's Vegas has this at some places I've seen. It's like a field goal game, and I'm like, really? So I have Notre Dame winning by double digits. I mean, we'll get to score predictions here in a little bit, but um, I mean, again, it just seems like when we think it's going to be close, Notre Dame rolls, and then when we think Notre
Yeah.
Dame's going to roll, it's close. So what are you thinking for this one, Lou?
Well, because this is projected to be close, yeah, it's probably going to be
Right.
Notre Dame can roll. But you don't want to get too caught up in that. It's both teams should be very, very highly motivated. Notre Dame smells the playoffs, and North Carolina, I think, is looking at this game the way Notre Dame did at Clemson, as a validation game.
Sure.
Right? Notre Dame has been established as a top 10 program, but it's like, okay, can you get to that next championship type level and beat one of these type teams? That's the same right now with North Carolina. They're ranked 19th in that first college football playoff poll. They've been hovering in that top 25 range the past 2 years with Mack Brown. I mean, the 6 games they lost last year were by a total of 26 points. They were a 2 point conversion away from upsetting Clemson last
Right.
year. So they've been close, like Notre Dame used to be close against the Georgias. It's like, can they now get that validation win that, okay, we're not just a top 25 team, but we're going to be a force in the ACC in years to come? And they need that type of win against Notre Dame to get there.
They had a ton of preseason hype, Lou. Weren't they number 5 at some point, and then they lost to FSU?
Yeah, well, they were considered a preseason top 25 team. Part of it is because they were competitive last year. Mack Brown is a national championship Hall of Fame coach um, at Texas. And look, they've moved up to number 5 in great part because the Big Ten wasn't playing and
Right.
Ohio State wasn't in there, and neither was the Pac 12. And it's just, it became a war of attrition, and you had to put somebody at number 5.
Right.
And it's like, okay, let's put North Carolina there. And Mack Brown was the first to admit that they were overrated there, and it was too much too soon, maybe, for the
Sure.
program, that they hadn't really evolved to the point where they should be there, and they didn't know how to perhaps handle success. That's one of the things you often have to go through. It's maybe like the Cleveland Browns last year. They were such a chic pick that they're going to be great now with some of the additions there. They didn't know how to handle it. Maybe
Sure.
Tampa Bay in the NFL this year too. Oh, they got Tom Brady now. They're going to be fantastic, and it's sometimes you get a little ahead of yourself, and they still have to learn how to deal with success.
We have the top 25 college football playoff poll that was released Tuesday night. Alabama at number 1, no surprise there. Notre Dame number 2, no surprise. Clemson 3, Ohio State 4, Texas A&M 5, and then rounding out the top 10, you have Florida, Cincinnati, Northwestern, Georgia, and Miami. Look at Northwestern, Lou, at the number 8 spot. So when you look at the top 25, obviously it's such a funky year. Looking at some of the teams in there, Iowa State, BYU, Coastal Carolina, Marshall. I mean, some schools that you're not typically used to seeing. Tulsa. But what was your biggest takeaway from seeing this college football top 25 ranking?
Well, like with most everyone else, Brigham Young has been in the top 7 or 8 with a 9-0 record. They're all the way down at 14
Hmm.
because of, it looks like strength of schedule does matter there in some way. I was,
They've played
listen,
nobody.
yeah, and I'm a little surprised that Wisconsin at 2-1 is still at 16 and all. But look, we've been saying this for the last 4 or 5 weeks. The top four teams have been pretty clear.
Yeah.
Notre Dame needed to beat Clemson for the validation, as we talked about earlier in the season, that, okay, now they do belong there. And that SEC, ACC championship games,
Yeah.
probably Alabama versus Florida and Notre Dame versus Clemson.
They're
Those
national quarterfinals pretty much, right, Lou?
really, people talk about, you should we should increase it to 8 teams. That's your 18 playoff right there. Those championship games in the
Sure.
Power Five conferences. Those will determine it. You already have pretty much an 18 playoff. The first round are those league championship games, especially in the Power Five conferences. So those will kind of really tell you where the seedings will be. But I think those top four teams have clearly distinguished themselves, and Florida is coming on.
Yeah.
That's going to be an interesting one. Texas A&M, you anticipated sooner or later they were going to get that turned around. So those are more so the wild cards. I still have a hard time buying that a Cincinnati or a non-power five or a group of five team will be included in the playoffs, but we'll see what happens on December 19th.
Yeah.
Hopefully, we get to that point.
I feel like for Cincinnati to get in there, you would need Clemson to just blow the doors off Notre Dame. You probably need Texas A&M to stumble. You would need Alabama to beat Florida for Cincinnati to sneak in there. Um,
Or
yeah,
actually, Notre Dame to beat Clemson, because now Clemson with 2 losses is out like Florida would be with two
sure. Yeah,
losses.
I guess either way. But I think that, yeah, if Notre Dame narrowly loses to Clemson, then Cincinnati's in a tough spot. So yeah, I think the 1 and 2, no surprise. Clemson at 3. Over Ohio State was a little bit of surprise for me. But look, I mean, that's the College Football Playoff Committee's way of saying they have more of a body of work. I thought it was going to be Ohio State 3, Clemson 4. When you look at those 3 one-loss teams in Clemson, Texas A&M, and Florida, Clemson has the best loss without your starting quarterback on the road against, and you lose in double overtime against the number 2 team in the country. So I thought the College Football Playoff Committee did a fine job. A little bit surprised again with 3/4, but that's their way of saying body of work. But I mean, it's still relatively early in the season. I mean, it's kind of late for Notre Dame, but I mean, this is the first ranking. There's still a ton of movement to be had. Lou, let's wrap it up with score prediction. That is an article that we have up on blueandgold.com. So tell me about what your pick is and why.
I looked at that Boston College game, 45-31. I said, dang, that would be a perfect pick against North Carolina. You can't pick the same score
Hey,
2 weeks in a
this
row
is the
like
year to
that.
maybe do that.
Uh, I guess earlier this week, one of my bold predictions was that Notre Dame would hold North Carolina under 30 points. So I'm looking at maybe a 41-27 type of game. And I think also limiting them to field goals is
Sure.
going to be essential in this game. That's what happened against Clemson. Regulation time, it was 33-33. Clemson had to kick 4 field goals, including 2 of them in the red zone. So I think that's going to be pivotal aspect to the game. And I just really anticipate Clark Lee to have a good game plan with the emphasis on foremost stopping the run. You can weather, a huge passing output, but you can't weather giving up over 200, 250 yards or so to the running attack, which, you have one of the most dynamic tandems in the country with Javonte Williams and Michael Carter.
Well, we appreciate you guys watching this video. Please like the video, hit that thumbs up button, subscribe to our YouTube channel, use promo code Nike75 at blueandgold.com. Stay safe, everyone, and have a happy Thanksgiving.